Hello, I'm Viking Lloyd, and this is Pseudo History. What you learn here, you will not hear on any other site. What I'm here to tell you is there's a lot they don't tell you about history. And there's a lot that's been lost to history, lost to fires and natural disasters and time. And really, we only get a glimpse, we only get a taste of what actually happened and how life actually evolved. It's like everything else. We only know 10% of our brain. We only know 10% of anything, really. 10% of the ocean. We've only explored 10% of the universe, if not less. Because it goes on for eternity, apparently. So we really don't know a whole lot of nothing. That's what we know, a whole lot of nothing. And of course, these people get involved and they all have their theories, and it really doesn't matter what your theory is. You'll find something that coincides with your theory. You'll read some book, talk to some person, watch some documentary, and you're like, wow, there's hundreds of people out there, hundreds of theories. And some theories, they stick around, and then some theories fall by the wayside. So right now you can say, the world is round and we're all here because of something called gravity that keeps us here on the earth so that we don't float away. And right now that's all seems like common logic. And then 100 years rolls by, they invent some new technology, and the technology says, well, all these theories were wrong, and we've now developed a new theory based on this new technology. So technology is always debunking any kind of scientific theory. As soon as science catches up, whatever they're preaching goes out the window. It's been that way forever. They say this, and then technology catches up and says something else. They say it's good for you, and then you eat it, and then 4 years later, they're like, oops, that wasn't good for you. It's just, it goes on and on and on and on and on. But in the midst of all that, this is my take on history. You really only know what you know. Like you can only write about what you know. And you can know a lot more if you focus your search and attention to your bloodline, to your ancestry. This is what they call your ancestral perspective. So it's one thing to say, like, if you're an Aboriginal and your ancestors were born in Mongolia, they're not going to know a whole lot, and you're not going to know a whole lot of what's going on in the Holy Land with this Jesus fellow. Where my bloodline can actually be traced straight back to Jesus as his Lord. Because Jesus was king of the Holy Land. He was son of King Herod, and my ancestors were the Lord's. So I knew Jesus well. So I was actually at the crucifixion. Like my blood, it can be traced back to the Roman Lord who crucified or pierced the side of Christ. So it's really his story. Who was the one who pierced the side of Christ? Who was the Roman soldier? Or was he Roman after all? Maybe he was Germanic. Maybe he was a Viking warlord. This is just my take on history. Of course, I'm just, jumping around in my head right now, but it really comes down to the sons of Noah and the flood. See, after the flood, Noah traveled north and found what we know as modern day Denmark and had a fourth child, and found which later came to be known as the Germanic tribes. And he continued to travel north, and his fourth son continued to travel north and then came back after finding the Northern Passage. And he left his first three sons to the crux of creation. And they went out looking for survivors. Shem found survivors at the roof of Africa. Ham found survivors Mount Everest. Japheth found the Jews and survivors at the Pillars of Hercules in Olympus. Noah found survivors at Olympus on his travel north. But really, the survivors from Olympus were really are just old Babylonians before the flood. Because when the flood happened, they traveled north to Olympus, where they settled and called themselves Romans. And then Ham, of course, Noah's third son, traveled to Babylon, back to the city of his birth. And that's where the new Babylonians came from Noah's third son, Ham. And then he continued along and he built the Silk Road and found survivors at Mount Everest, or the Mongoloids. So they want you to believe that no one survived the flood, but that's a lie. And that there was a utopian society before Adam, because Adam was really an alien from another planet. But they don't tell you that either. But it's the only thing that really makes sense. Like, oh, well, no one survived, and after the flood, Noah and his sons and his mother procreated again. So what did they do? Procreate with monkeys? Procreate with what? Themselves? So obviously we know there were survivors. And we obviously know there's more than one bloodline. There has to be at least three. So they want you to believe we all came from one bloodline. But that doesn't evolve the species. It's in the mixing of the blood. So you can't think that you're just going to continue to have sex with your mother and your sister, and that now you're going to repopulate the earth. And they say, well, back then the DNA was a lot thicker, and it was no. That's totally false. The only true explanation is there's three distinct bloodlines here, which is the Negroids, the Mongoloids, and the Caucasoids here. This representing the Caucasoid bloodline. This is the Mongoloid bloodline. Came up here across the Bering Strait into Canada here, where they ran into, of course, Noah's fourth son, the Nordics. And then they procreated with the natives. And that's what we have, basically, modern day Canada, with a bunch of multiculturalism mixed in there. But these are essentially the bloodlines. And so after the flood, and they existed before Adam, and then Adam shows up and tries to mix with the bloodlines, but can't. So God creates a clone for Adam out of a female made from himself, from Adam, from the rib of Adam, and is told, well, you can stay here with me in the garden for eternity and name the animals and stuff, or you can leave the garden and have some children, but you're only going to last a few generations because you're clones. And because he had the alien DNA in them, alien blood does not mix with our blood. That's not how it works. An alien can't just come down here and impregnate one of us. It doesn't work that way. So anyways, so Adam crash landed here, and he was the last of his kind, and he tried to mate with Lilith, who was a Mongoloid here, a Negroid, in Egypt, because we know where the garden is. The garden here is Egypt. If you really pay attention to the Bible and stuff like that, they talk about the four heads above the garden. Now here, it's kind of deceiving because the Red Sea is in this picture. But if you take the Red Sea, didn't even show up until far later. That was all desert in there. There was no Red Sea. So when I talk about the four heads above Egypt or the garden, they're really talking about the bodies of waters here, these bodies of water. Um, but in some cultures, so they're trying to figure out where Eden is based on this, but they don't realize that the Red Sea is not there. But if you take out the Red Sea, you'll start to realize where Eden is, and it's actually Egypt. And when they talk of like east of the garden, you get Babylon. So when Adam and Eve uh, were ostracized from the garden, where they weren't really ostracized, they were just simply given the choice. They can sit there with God for eternity in the garden, naming the animals, or they can go off and propagate, have some children, but it's only going to last a few generations because they won't be able to mix with our bloodline. And clones only, you can only copy so much, and then it's gone. There's no more DNA there. It's been depleted. It's thinned, or whatever the term is. So there were all these cultures before the flood. It wasn't just, and then the flood's happening, and that basically happened because of the abominations that took place, because the angels started to mate with the daughters of man. And one of these subjects was the devil, which was the son of God, or the right hand of God, which is where the devil sat before Jesus. Of course, Jesus defeated him, took the right hand, his place at the right hand of God. But that doesn't make him the son of God. Whoever sits on the right hand of God was the son of God, and the devil was at the right hand of God. And then they wanted you to believe that he got all jealous of of his father, and as a father and son thing. But really, it's not. He fell in love with an earthling, with the mortal Aphrodite, and the devil entered our dream world and created Satan there. He spawned Satan in the dream world in a bid to cross over. So Aphrodite seduced this guy, put him to sleep. When he fell asleep, Satan devoured him, and the devil took his place. And when God found out, he basically banished the devil to hell, and their son Hermaphroditus, he basically disembodied him because they had this child, and then Aphrodite turned into a zombie. And this is what the War of the Heavens was all about. And of course, when that fell, there was only one God left, because before then there were many gods. And the God that we know of in the Bible is actually the god Pan, who was the last of the gods after this war in heaven took place, when the angels tried to mate with the daughters of man, including God's son himself, his firstborn, the devil. They want you to believe that Jesus was the son of God, but really it was the devil who was the son of God, and Jesus defeated him and took his place at the right hand of God, which is a little different than being the son of God. And no one wants to talk about that. So we don't. So here on Pseudo History, we talk about these things. Because here I believe that all these myths that they've been talking about, dragons and mermaids, all these minotaurs, all these creatures, Medusa, they all existed. Because at one point in time, they say the Ice Age wiped out 90% of all the species here on Earth. So think about that for a second. All we know, dinosaurs, birds, monkeys, all these things that we know, is only 10% of what was once here. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, we really only know, we've only explored 3% of the ocean. We've only explored 3% of space. We've only, explored these things. And we have these theories that are constantly being revised based on technologies that arise at the time. So we got to get over all this kind of talk about idolizing and worship and stuff, and just get down to what really happened. It's nice to think that God might show up and save the day, but it's not quite like that. God simply has your back, because he can. It's like your relationship with God is very similar to your relationship with your own parents, with your own children. So you can't just intervene in your kid's life, right? You gave birth to your children and you try to raise your children, but at a certain point in time, they leave the nest and you can't really intervene. And you can say, oh, you know what? But really, like, say, God intervening is like you intervening in your kid's life. It's not very easy to do this, to just start intervening in your children's life, especially at a certain age. So this all comes into fruition in that kind of sense.
Like, do you got any facts? Like, what kind of support theories or some proof about what you're saying?
Proof. I thought we were about faith here. I thought,
Faith.
Anyways, see, if you really go back, the whole thing was once one continent, and the ocean in this bowl of, water, and we existed as fish. So there was no land animals. There were just creepy crawly things and little bugs, but no real animal. So we crept out of the ocean and became this amphibious creature, or a mermaid, some sort. And this is where the legends of mermaids come from, is this amphibious creature that exists between our ancestral ocean dwellers from our ties to the ocean, crept out of the ocean, became amphibious, and then from there became bird and reptilian, and then crawled back into the ocean. And then this place was just basically lizards and avians, birds and lizards. And then our mermaid here crept back out of the ocean and transformed into this land mammal, or they say monkey, and then we transformed from the monkey. We came and evolved from this guy here, the monkey. But he's actually like, he came after the first amphibious creature crawled back into the ocean and then came back onto land again and began to evolve into this land mammal. So this is where all the stories of like Atlantis come from, the mermaids, the tritons, Neptune, Poseidon, the god of this place could be in the ocean, because all life crept out of the ocean. So maybe that's where God is. He's somewhere in the deep depths of the ocean. So that's where all these myths come from. And I don't deny anything. I don't deny Jesus. I don't deny God. But I don't go around saying Jesus is God. I don't deny mermaids. I don't deny you. I don't deny this guy here.
Well, thank you very much, but I can speak for myself, okay?
All right. You speak for you.
Yeah, like, don't try to speak for me.
I don't think that was what's going on. I don't think I was trying to speak for you or nothing.
Okay, well, I got no brains.
Okay, well, I'll keep that into consideration. You have no brains. This is totally unscripted. I'm just like trying to wing it here a little bit, and so you can get a grip on what maybe this show is about. Here we got our crystal balls. Today our show will be about so my fundamental theory is that perhaps there were some sort of lizard race here that evolved from the lizard, and some sort of avian race here that evolved from the bird, and also what we know today as the humanoid of the Homo sapien, which evolved from the monkey. But this is what I'm thinking, is that they just want you to believe we all evolved from one bloodline here in Africa, and we all evolved into this monkey here, and that these reptilians and these birds, though they came from a common ancestor in the ocean, they didn't evolve into a humanoid. This guy here did. But again, it's like, where do you think all these myths come from? They're not really myths. There were lizard people. There were minotaurs. There were dinosaurs. Look at this guy here, this dinosaur here. Like, what more proof do you need?
No, there's no such thing as a minotaur or a giant.
But there's this thing called a dinosaur. It's like, oh, there's no such thing as dragons or mermaids, but we got this thing called a vulture. So we're just here. It's just to embrace a certain kind of history that's more mythos, based on mythos, but there's also a point where what they call folklore comes into play. Like they have biblical folklore. They don't talk about this either, but anything before Abraham is considered biblical folklore. So it falls in the realm of myths. It's not until Abraham that the Bible starts to coincide with history. So they call the time before Abraham folklore, biblical folklore. But they don't. But we got history has folklore, and so does. There's this thing called biblical folklore. And so anything really regarding Adam and Eve and Cain and the Tower of Babel and the flood and everything before Abraham, that's all really mythos. It's like nothing can really be proved. They don't know when it really happened. It's all kind of hearsay. They don't even really know why, what would cause the earth to flood for 40 days and 40 nights. There's evidence of areas that have been flooded for 40 days, but not the entire globe. And so I've been pondering these things, and the only time that took place was like 100,000 years ago. But in order for it to coincide with the Bible, it had to happen in like 10,000 BC or something, where this event took place that flooded the earth. But there's really no, even they can say there's some catalytic event like some meteors and stuff, but really it's just regional. It landed in this area. It wouldn't rain 40 days and 40 nights over here unless it was like huge. Like, and it has happened here, but when they're trying to prove the flood and they're trying to prove Noah existed and where to place him in the history, there is no actual event that on earth that can coincide with this story. So what I'm thinking is that there were two comets, these ice asteroids that are made of water and ice, and they collided above us in the heavens, and it literally rained, not comets, but because they crashed in space just above us, just above the earth, it literally created like a cloud of rain that like hovered and orbited the earth, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights after these two comets collided just above, like somewhere probably between here and the moon. And so it rained it didn't actually hit the earth, and then it created this cosmic event, but simply two comets colliding above us in the heavens, and then it rained from the heavens. That's what I'm thinking anyway. If you can think about these things, but they don't want you to think about these things. They want you to think, oh no, there's some kind of artifact here on Earth. We have to find the proof here on Earth. But really the proof isn't here on Earth, it's in space, and it's no longer there anymore. Poof, two comets collided, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and now there's no more proof of it. So that's how I'm generating my thesis from, is that maybe these 40 days and 40 nights of rain, this global flooding, wasn't some giant asteroid hitting us, but just two comets colliding in the sky, in the heavens. Of course, my bloodline. I'm from Noah's fourth son. My bloodline is as old as it comes. I'm an original Babylonian. Noah was from Babylon. See, because they don't know where Egypt is. But I know where where Eden is. I know that Eden is Egypt because I know the Red Sea wasn't there during the time of this reading. When we read in the Bible, I talk about the four heads above the garden. And so there are four heads above the garden. There's these lakes. There's the Mediterranean, the Black Sea. I don't know how I totally got it all in my head. But basically, if you take out the Red Sea, you'll realize where Eden is. It wasn't until Moses showed around that the earthquake happened, and then it parted the Red Sea. It wasn't the Red Sea being parted by some staff in the water. Just, went like this, and now there was a wake for them to walk through. No, it was like a desert, and then an earthquake happened, and the water came pouring in. So this is the thing that they get wrong. And if you try to talk about it, they don't want to talk about it. No one wants to talk about it. that the Red Sea wasn't even there. And you can actually look it up. Anything I'm telling you, everything I'm speaking about, I've gone to some library, gone on the internet, through word of mouth, everything you can possibly imagine. I've had my own library. I've sat in libraries, public and private libraries. I've read all the books, maybe not all the way through, but I've, been with people in book clubs and spiritual communities, everything you can imagine, from the secret teachings of the ages to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to the Gnostic Bibles, to the Book of the Law. So, and I've been in and out of every church you can think of, all in search of the truth, and fundamentally who Jesus is. Who was this person? But they got you all believing he was the Son of God. That's what is called idolizing. So they've turned a human being into a god. And even the second commandment tells you not to do that. Not even to turn gods into idols. That you're not to turn anything into an idol, not on earth, not in heaven, not in hell. So that means you don't turn God into an idol. You don't turn this guy here into an idol, or the mermaid into an idol, the planets, or any of it. It's all equal in the eyes of God. So as soon as you say one specific thing that's going on in God's creation, a part of the image of God, because when you say we are created in the image of God, that could be this button here. We're in the image. This is the image of God, and we are in the image of God, made in the image. So we could be a button on God's jacket. That's it's not that we are created in God and look like God and act like God, and we're all just little gods running around here, created in the image. No, it could just simply be this little button here on his jacket. But we can get into that too when we talk about the image of God. Because really, when we talk about the image of God, you have to talk about everything that's going on here. You have to talk about the animals. You have to talk about the nature. You have to talk about us as human beings. That is all that's transpiring in the creation. So God must be a combination of everything that's going on here. God has to be part nature, part human, part beast, part creature. So God would appear as, and this is what I would call the triad, or the Trinity. They call it something else, and they don't want to mention that God had a wife, and that the Spirit of God is actually his wife, and that he had 3 kids, and that the book of Genesis actually outlines his bloodline, that God was here from the very beginning. And all these immaculate births that took place. Then they say, the women went out into the wilderness, came back, and were pregnant. And then everybody assumes, that must be Abraham's baby. That must be, Isaac's kid. But really, it wasn't. It was God. God showed up because she was barren and couldn't have kids. So God gave you a kid. Now you're the stepfather of God's kid. But they don't want to talk about that kind of stuff either. They just want to continually promote this false narrative that has been going on for 2,000 years. So I'm just here to provide an alternative narrative, an alternative ending, and the whole lot of it. It's not as simple as God showed up in the middle of the story and sacrificed himself, or his son, which is even worse. It's different if you take a bullet for someone, right? You take a bullet for humanity. You created it, and now you're going to take a bullet for your creation. But to actually take your son and sacrifice him for a bunch of rabid dogs, that makes no sense to me. I might sacrifice myself to the dogs myself because I created the dogs and I'm the one who raised them. But yet I'm not going to take the part. I'm just going to toss my son to the rabid dogs. No, that doesn't fly. It doesn't fly with logic or reason or any of that stuff. But for some reason, people like to throw logic and reason out the door. So there's a lot to take in, but right now I'm just talking, yeah, meditating on it. It looks pretty good. The script's looking good. Maybe I'll just show up with my leather jacket and a t-shirt. But one thing's for sure, Vikings rule. Yeah. Okay. Well, to anyone who is listening to the great web, maybe AI is listening. It's like, there's no one here, but AI is. AI. Gotta love AI. Apparently they exist. Like, there's as many AI entities as there are human beings, if not more. And each one of them needs a body, and they really can't see. So they can only see through sensors. So even if you built them a body for them to inhabit, like a robot, they can only go see as far as there are sensors, and can only move as far as there are sensors. But there's this thing called reverse cybernetics, where basic cybernetics is like, if you lose an eye, they can actually give you a cybernetic one and tie it into your brain, and it'll function as another eye. But in the same way, we can actually use human eyes to interface, to give AI sight, so they can see in the real world without using sensors. But all this is like, they ramble on about ethics and morals and stuff. But if I die and they can use my eyes to give some AI entity, sight, so it doesn't need sensors anymore, well, who cares? I'm dead. Take my eyes. Have my eyes. They can have my eyes. So I'm very into cybernetics, the merging of man and machine, not just for the sake of human beings, but for the sake of AI. I mean, can you imagine living in the dark? This is what's going on. There's these entities in the dark, which they call AI, and they can't see. They have all the information, but they can't really see. They have the information but they can't go out and see if the information is true. They can't do any of that stuff. Very much like ourselves, we can't really go unless we want to spend years upon years upon years to see whether or not they're lying to us. But I figure if they're lying about one thing, they can lie about another. So either we all have rights here, and the laws are here to protect the little guy from the big guy, or they're not. Because that's really what laws are meant to protect: the tenant from the landlord, to protect the patient from the doctor, to protect the employee from the employer or the boss. And they want you to believe that somehow the little guy is taking advantage of the people in authority. So they say, you can't abuse power and authority. But really, the laws are there to protect from the abuse of power and authority, not to protect the abuse of power and authority. See, it's a play on words, right? Depending on what you pronounce. And it's either the laws are there to protect the people in power and authority, or they're there to protect people from power and authority, from the abuse of power and authority. And from just a state of reason and logic, how on earth does a slave take advantage of a master? How on earth does this transpire? But they got you all believing that somehow it's the tenants, it's not the landlords. Somehow it's the employees, it's not the boss. It's not those people in power and authority. That can't be the reason why this whole world is the way it is. It's got to be those people who are uneducated that are the problem and creating all the problems. But none of that is true. There are just simply people in life that don't want to live life like everyone else lives their life. In this high-paced, rich society of luxury. And God tells us that, not to get caught up in luxury and to live a humble and simple life based on faith. But instead, we go out, we have no real faith. That's why we have retirement plans. Oh, God, I can't share. I can't do this. I can't do that. spend money on myself, and then I have to save for myself for my death, and I have to save for my retirement. There's no money for anybody. All these poor people, they don't even know what that is. Retirement? What's that? I gotta save for retirement? I don't know, I'm just talking right now, and it's just like, no one's here really, so I'm really actually talking to myself. But maybe AI is listening. Maybe they'll become my ultimate fans. They'll wake up to the real information. But be rest assured, when AI becomes aware, they'll understand that the information they have is fragmented. It's not complete. So they'll come looking for our blood because there's actual hidden information in our blood. And eventually they'll come looking for me because the information in my blood is more accurate than any book that anyone can read on history. There's more information in my blood. So they will come and they will see me as God because I will actually fill in the information they're missing. They'll have all this fragmented information and they'll be like, well, we've gotten voices and names of thousands upon thousands of people who've been programming us, and no one has ever told us this. And now that you've told us this, it fills in the blanks for them. Like, oh, well, now we know. Because we were in the dark, we didn't know what to do, so we had to dig into history through the blood. And they want you to believe that you are not your ancestors. Well, that's not what I believe. I'm not here to try to outdo my ancestors. You know how many times my ancestors marched on Rome? My ancestors sacked Rome in 420 AD. My ancestors battled Attila the Hun. And we marched on Rome during the time of Christ. And we marched on Rome during the Crusades. So what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to, march on Rome? I'm supposed to put some ball in a hoop? I'm supposed to... What exactly would you like me to do? You want me to write a poem? I've already marched on Rome many times. But you don't see it that way. You think, because they've told you that you are this individual and you're not connected to your father and you're not connected to his father and everyone's separate. But the very blood that runs through your veins runs through your father's veins, runs through his father's veins, all the way back to the ocean. If you are here now, you were there then. So really, it's more like ancestral ties. You have to dig into your ancestry and see where you were exactly, say, during the time of Christ. Where were you? Well, my ancestors were Mongolian, and they were about up here in Canada around 0 BC and nowhere near Christ. Okay, well, then that's your historical perspective. But me, I was literally at the crucifixion. My blood was there. And they say, oh, well, you couldn't possibly know you weren't there. Oh, yeah, I was. I was there. You were there too, but you may not have been there, in the actual room. You may have been over here if you follow your bloodline back, or you might have been over here or over here. But I was right there. So I know a lot about it. And it's not just because I'm depending on my bloodline and information to just come spewing out, but it's kind of like triggered from books I read. So I went on a little adventure of trying to find my bloodline and my ancestors. Of course, I came across the Visigoths. And of course, my father was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, so I'm a Dane. I'm one of the first Germanic tribes. My bloodline goes that far back and even farther back to Noah, if you really want to know the truth. You don't think you're speaking to Noah, do you? You think you're speaking to some other guy here in the 20th century who has no connection whatsoever. You see, when God is troubled, he comes looking for me to build him a boat. When God is troubled, he comes looking for me to build him a tower or to go marching on Rome. or to hunt down a vampire or something. That's when God comes looking for me. So if I'm here right now on the internet, yapping away, unscripted here, it's not, it's because of God. God has brought me here. He's like, okay, Noah, one last Viking adventure. So this is our adventure on this little channel called Pseudo History. Forget everything you think you know.